Senator Grassley, you are next.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks all of you for testifying. I'm leading up to asking a question of Mr. Morris. The United States originally entered the OECD negotiations with bipartisan support in response to the nation's implementing a so-called digital service taxes that unfairly got U.S. companies. The U.S. Trade Representative determined these extraterritorial taxes to be discriminatory and inconsistent with international tax principles and our bilateral tax treaties. Now, just over 2 years later, foreign countries continue to threaten digital service taxes. At the same time, foreign countries are threatening to impose additional extraterritorial taxes on U.S. companies, an invitation of the Biden administration, pursuant to Pillar 2 of the so-called undertaxed profits rules. So, Mr. Morris, I kind of see the OECD as kind of a super world government trying to impose something against the Constitution of the United States. You can tell me if I'm wrong on that, but could you elaborate on how the so-called undertaxed profit rule runs afoul with our bilateral tax treaties? And if it's a violation of tax treaties, you'd think that whatever they're proposing to do would have to be proposed to the Congress of the United States for our approval or disapproval.
Thank you very much, Senator Grassley, for that question. And let me first thank you for the leadership you gave as chair of this committee and ranking member, I believe, in relation to digital services taxes. Those remain a problem, but let's put those to one side. So on the UTPR, a number of distinguished lawyers and academics have expressed a strong view, yes, that UTPR is contrary to US and many other countries' tax treaties, specifically to Article 7, Article 9, and Article 24, which is to say business profits and the non-discrimination clauses. In short, what they argue is that the UTPR allows other countries to tax profits not arising in that country, but arising instead in the home country, and that is totally contrary to treaty policy. Now, obviously, as you'll have read in other testimonies, these are honestly held opposing views, which is why I indicate that there probably will be litigation. But to the point that you make, Senator, it is absolutely the prerogative of the Congress, and in the case of treaties of the Senate, to make those changes. And so far, those changes have not been made. And one of the problems with Pillar 2 and the UTPR is that that takes place with national legislation. There is not at the current point a treaty involved in this. So making those treaty changes will have to be done on a bilateral basis. And obviously, so far, that has not been done. And just one final important point. Really, any damage to the tax treaty network should be avoided because it'll only damage cross-border trade and investment and the growth and jobs that that creates. So I applaud you for raising this question, Senator, and I do hope that we can all work on it.
And I'm going to lead up to a question for Senator Mr. Bunn. The administration claims that Pillar 2 global tax framework will end, and I quote, a global race to the bottom, end of quote, with respect to corporate taxes. However, in reality, Pillar 2 may simply shift the focus away from a competition based on low tax rates and traditional tax incentives towards one based on providing direct cash subsidies. Can you discuss how Pillar 2 places its thumb on the scale in favor of direct cash subsidies and how that advantages global competitors like China?
Thank you for the question, Senator. You're absolutely right. The design of the global minimum tax rules put a preference towards cash grants, direct subsidies, and a preference against the non-refundable credits that the U.S. tax code has generally used to incentivize different business activities. This is pretty transparent, looking at some jurisdictions and the way they're planning to implement the rules, that they are planning to use some of the revenues they raise from the top-up taxes and turn those into direct subsidies for businesses. There are some countries that have large state-owned enterprises that receive all sorts of direct subsidies and support or below market rate loans from the state that will be essentially outside of the scope for these effective tax rate calculations. So whereas a U.S. company that is benefiting from either foreign-derived intangible income or non-refundable credits or some other policies might see a top-up Other countries might just be giving cash directly to businesses and not having those subsidies subject to a top-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.